So we'll be talking about implements and the equipment that we've, over the years, which has only really been like 3 years since we've been in production here, have acquired, and also some of it has been inherited from with the land that came with a tractor and a scrape box with some shanks that came with it. And so we'll just start kind of with some of the things that we did have and what we've acquired over the past years. We did have this harrow that we've been using for cover crop mainly in November when we're prepping the site for covering all of our cover crop. And so this has been a really helpful piece of implement. As you can tell, we've also acquired this particular bed shaper that was, has been really helpful for us to keep our bed shapes in 40-inch beds that we normally have here. We've recently acquired this flail mower, which has been a huge help every year when we cut down our cover crop, and so this really makes it a whole lot easier for the cover crop to be broken down and integrated into the soil. And then of course one of our really newest ones along with the flail mower has been the spader. And this spader, we normally do use it for prepping our beds. We do disc for the first time just to kind of get the soil kind of up and elevated, and then we'll come in through with our spader and sort of like work the soil so that we can come in with our bed shaper when we're prepping our sites in late April, early May. So that will be happening soon in the next month. So yeah, this has been a huge key implement that we inherited just last year. So it's only had one season in use, but these two particular implements have been a huge help in allowing us to operate our farm more efficiently and effectively and prepping our site in the way that we need it to be so that we can get our transplants and seeds out into the field. Of course, we have this sort of disc lifter, and this kind of like lifts the beds and makes a little kind of a mound after we've sort of gone through the process of disking. Well, first of all, flail mowing, disking, spading, and then lifting the beds before we shape the beds with a bed shaper. And then we use this particular implement here that we have, which is an undercutter bar, during the season to keep our weed management for any beds that aren't in circulation and that are acquiring weeds. Primarily our highest weed here that we have in our field has been field bindweed. So this has been a huge help in mitigating the field bindweed from spreading over the years and weakening it, although we'll never really get rid of it, but it will lessen our field bindweed during the growing season when we've irrigated our beds during the year. Of course, we have a rototiller here that we use to kind of tilt the soil a little bit on the surface, just to fluff it up before we plant on our transplants. The box scraper that came with the tractor that we'll be showing you in a minute, with the shanks that are about maybe 2 to 3 inches long. So they don't go very deep, but they do help in opening up the ground a little bit. And then we've got some Alabama Alabama shovels and some arrows, along with some some cutters for our beds. And this is mainly for weeding during the time when we have our production into place, so that we can maintain the weeds on the sides and in the furrows during the harvest season. So these have been all really key implements and tools that have been really helpful in mechanizing some of the things that we would normally have to do either with by hand or with some smaller equipment that you can do, which is like a BCS walk behind tractor. And Although we don't use those here, I mean, that would be the only other way that this amount of land would be put into production, would have to be used with some sort of small or larger size mechanization to function efficiently at this particular farm. And then of course, we've got the last implement that's at the very far back over here. And you'll see that's our disc that we also bought our first year. That was the first piece of equipment that we bought that allowed us to sort of break some of the ground on our farm here. And although we're not really big believers of tilling, heavily tilling, we do still use it both during the beginning of our season and then the end of our season to kind of get our cover crop prepped. And then the last sort of implement that we inherited here has been just a drill bit that goes on the back of our tractor, and that's mainly been to make holes for either plants or trees that we plant so that we don't have to dig holes, which is key because when we do have our orchard, which we'll hopefully have in the near future, this will be a huge implement that will help us to plant, several hundred feet trees in the future without having to dig holes. And then lastly, our Kubota LA482. This has been a really huge piece of equipment that came with the farm. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really been useful both for the front loader and the capacity of being able to put an implement with a PTO on with it. It's not a really heavy piece of equipment. I think the horsepower on this particular equipment is only 40 horsepower, so it's a pretty low horsepower, but we really don't need much more for what we're really doing. However, if it has been a huge blessing and also just like benefit in the way that we work here at our farm to get things done in an effective and efficient way. And so this has been a huge piece of equipment, both for the front loader to move mulch and other pieces of things that are heavy, like debris, logs, and other things that normally take a little bit more of a heavier load. So maintaining these pieces of equipment are also something to keep in mind and know that that's also a reality. Trying to get them off the ground a lot of the times. We try to do that with like pallets. We also try to grease them, make sure we have the pins that are appropriate for each of these for when they are being hitched on the back of the tractor. And then of course, making sure everything is functional before we use them. So those are all really important things that we've began to understand and acquire as we start to acquire more equipment, but also mainly just keeping track of our tractor, making sure that the oil, the air filters, and any of the grease points that are on the tractor are constantly being changed and greased, just so that we can continue to have this piece of equipment and not have it break down either at the beginning of this season or during the season or even after the season when we actually really utilize it, because it's a huge piece of equipment that we constantly use to make sure our operation is in constant efficiency. So something that we are constantly thinking around and always hoping to better improve as we learn from other farmers who know about this equipment and are able to show us the maintenance and just the care to make sure that the equipment doesn't fail us when we're needing to use it. Yeah, so although the tractor was inherited as a part of the property, we maintain it as a part of the business, and so that the cost for it isn't as much. We did at the very beginning when we inherited it, we made sure that the dealership from Kubota came out and looked at it, and that was a little bit costly than what we were expecting. We spent like close to $2,000 just in trying to make sure that the tractor itself and how it functions, learning around its uses um, would need to be, and so that was a cost that we had to incur. As a part of the equipment, I would say just in equipment, there's roughly maybe about $15,000 just in implement equipment that's sitting on this sort of like equipment yard that we have. And that's something that you need to really think around, because if you are on a site like we are, which is roughly 4.5 acres, you really want to make sure that you have the equipment that's effective for what you're really trying to accomplish at your site. And even though this is about $15,000, it took us a while to find the funding and to also divvy up the cost between both myself and my business partner. So that has been a really important thing for us, is to not have to be dependent on other folks, because a lot of the times other folks are either one using their equipment, or two, you're having to contract someone who is normally quite busy and trying to get them on the dates that you need them here at the site, which is unpredictable. It can be frustrating many times. And so making sure you have and can find folks who are either selling used equipment, or you can go to auctions where maybe farmers are getting rid of some of the equipment. But mainly the way that we acquired most of this is by farmers that were already leaving the industry. And so some of this equipment came from a prior farmer / friend who was selling some of their equipment. So that was the way that we inherited most of this.